The Basques are an indigenous ethno-linguistic people who primarily inhabit the Basque country, a region that straddles northeastern Spain and southwestern France. Although they live within the Iberian Peninsula, the Basques stand apart from other Iberian populations because of their distinct language, culture, and genetic profile. Their language, Basque, is a language isolate with no known relation to ancient Iberian or Indo-European tongues, and scholars believe it descends from the pre-Indo-European languages once spoken more widely across Western Europe. From both cultural and genetic perspectives, the Basques are most closely connected to the ancient Aquitani of what is now southwestern France. While the northern Aquitani gradually assimilated into a French identity, the southern communities preserved their language and culture, which endured as Basque. For this reason, the Basques are regarded as a distinct non-Indo-European population indigenous to Western Europe, with historical roots that long predate modern national borders. The origin of the Basques and their language has long been debated, giving rise to a number of hypotheses. Modern Basque, which is considered either a descendant or a close relative of Aquitanian and Proto-Basque, is the only surviving pre-Indo-European language in Western Europe. For this reason, the Basques are often seen as a remnant of the pre-Indo-European population of the continent. The main hypothesis, and the one most widely accepted, is the theory of native origin. According to this view, the Basque language developed entirely within the region stretching from northern Iberia to southern France, evolving over millennia without links to any other modern languages elsewhere. Genetic studies have provided important insights into this debate. In May 2012, the National Geographic Society's Genographic Project published a study using detailed DNA analysis from French and Spanish Basque regions. The results showed that Basques carry unique genetic patterns that set them apart from surrounding populations, supporting the idea of partial continuity between contemporary Basques and the Paleolithic and Mesolithic settlers of their homeland. Further, paleogenetic research confirms that the Basque genetic profile reaches back to prehistoric times, sharing broad similarities with other Europeans but with distinct features. One of the mitochondrial DNA haplotypes, U5, entered Europe during the Upper Paleolithic. Over time, it developed localized variants such as U8A, native to the Basque country and considered prehistoric, as well as the J haplogroup, which is also frequent among Basques. More recent studies suggest that the Basques descend from Neolithic farmers who intermarried with local hunter-gatherers before becoming genetically isolated from the rest of Europe for thousands of years. Evidence for this comes from genetic material taken from 8 Stone Age skeletons found in the El Portolón cave at Atapuerca in northern Spain. These individuals, who lived between 3,500 and 5,500 years ago, represent early Iberian farmers and appear to be the closest ancestors of modern Basques. The findings, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, show that Basques trace their ancestry primarily to these early farming groups. At the same time, they also retain genetic contributions from local Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, indicating that the incoming farmers intermingled with native groups over at least 2 millennia. Studies of Y DNA haplogroups add further detail. On their paternal lineages, most Basque men belong to haplogroup R1b DF27, which they share with many other Western Europeans. Research indicates that R1b spread into Western Europe from southwestern Eurasia during the Neolithic period or later, between 8,000 and 4,000 years ago. Around 4,500 years ago, however, nearly all Y DNA from the earlier admixture of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers and Neolithic farmers in Iberia was replaced by the lineages of Indo-European herders who migrated from the steppe. The distinctiveness of the Basque genome today is thought to be the result of small population size, genetic drift, and centuries of endogamy. In 2019, another major study published in Science analyzed ancient Iberian populations over long time spans. The research concluded that present-day Basques are best described as an Iron Age population that avoided the later admixture events, which shaped the rest of Iberia. From around 1000 BCE onward, most Iberian groups mixed with Central Europeans, Eastern Mediterraneans, and North Africans, leaving genomic traces that are absent in the Basques. This isolation appears to have preserved their distinct identity for at least 3 millennia. The earliest migrations of Homo erectus into Western Europe, including the area of the Basque country, had little lasting influence on settlement or culture. One notable site is the Atapuerca Mountains in northern Spain, where communities of Homo antecessor, or Homo erectus antecessor, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals lived for many generations. More substantial groups arrived between 150,000 and 75,000 years ago, leaving behind Acheulean tools and cultural traces. These early settlers often chose river valleys, particularly around the Ebro and Ador rivers. During the Middle Paleolithic, Neanderthals introduced the Mousterian culture to the region. They left a long cultural record in northern Spain and settled coastal areas of Biscay and Gipuzkoa. Neanderthal remains have also been uncovered in caves such as Lesachiki and Axlor. Around 35,000 years ago, Cro-Magnon populations entered the Basque lands, gradually displacing the Neanderthals. They brought the Aurignacian culture, and the Basque country became part of what archaeologists call the Franco-Cantabrian province, stretching from Asturias to Provence. This region experienced parallel cultural developments, with Aurignacian culture replaced in sequence by the Gravettian, Solutrean, and Magdalenian traditions. Except for the Aurignacian, all these cultures appear to have originated in the Franco-Cantabrian zone itself, suggesting no further waves of outside migration during the Paleolithic. Within today's Basque country, settlement was mostly limited to the Atlantic areas, likely due to climate conditions. At the end of the Ice Age, Magdalenian culture gave way to the Azilian. Hunters began to rely on smaller prey, while fishing and gathering seafood grew in importance. It was also during this time that the southern parts of the Basque country were first inhabited. From the Mediterranean coasts, Neolithic technologies slowly made their way into the region. Pottery was introduced first, followed later by sheep herding. As in much of Atlantic Europe, this transition from hunting to farming was gradual. More fully developed Neolithic sites are found in the Ebro Valley, where skeletal remains suggest possible colonization by Mediterranean settlers. A similar situation is seen in Aquitaine, likely reached by newcomers via the Garonne River. By the second half of the 4th millennium BCE, megalithic culture had spread throughout the Basque area. Collective burials became the norm, probably reflecting family or clan organization, and dolmens were widely built, alongside occasional use of caves. In contrast to the corridor-type dolmens of the Mediterranean basin, Atlantic dolmens were typically simple chambers. The use of copper and gold and later other metals did not appear in the Basque country until around 2500 BCE. With the arrival of metalworking, the first urban-like settlements emerged. One of the most notable was La Joya in southern Álava, which served as a settlement with connections to Portugal's Vila Nova de São Pedro culture and to the Tres group in Languedoc. At the same time, caves and natural shelters continued to be used, particularly in the Atlantic regions. Pottery without decoration, typical of the Neolithic, remained common until the bell beaker culture reached the Ebro Valley with its distinct style. Megalith building also continued well into the late Bronze Age. In Aquitaine, the Ardennasian culture of bowmen spread from the Garonne region across western France and into Belgium around 2400 BCE. During the late Bronze Age, parts of the southern Basque country came under the influence of the Cogotus culture of the Iberian Plateau, which was mainly pastoralist. In the Iron Age, groups linked to the late Urnfield culture moved along the Ebro into the southern Basque country, introducing elements of the Hallstatt culture and marking the arrival of Indo-European, particularly Celtic, influence. Settlements during this period were often located in difficult-to-reach places, protected with defensive structures. Agriculture became increasingly important, surpassing animal husbandry. It may also have been during this time that new megalithic forms appeared in the region, including stone circles or cromlechs, as well as standing stones or menhirs. When the Romans arrived in southwestern France, the Pyrenees, and the areas reaching into Cantabria, the land was home to various tribes, most of which were non-Indo-European. The Vascones are the group most closely connected with today's Basques, though evidence shows that Basque-related peoples lived not only around the Pyrenees but also as far north as the Garonne River. Julius Caesar himself mentioned them in De Bello Gallico, and inscriptions in the Aquitanian language, including both personal and divine names, confirm their presence. Many place names also point to this continuity. Most of the Aquitanian tribes were subdued in 65 BCE by Marcus Licinius Crassus, a lieutenant of Caesar. Yet Roman expansion into the Basque region had begun earlier, in the 2nd century BCE, with settlements at Caliguris and Gracuris on the upper Ebro. In the 1st century BCE, Pompey founded Pompelo, modern Pamplona or Iruña in Basque, though Roman control was not fully established until the reign of Emperor Augustus. Roman administration was relatively lenient, allowing the Basques to keep their local leaders and traditional laws. Romanization was stronger in Mediterranean areas, while in the Atlantic Basque lands it remained limited. This uneven development is one reason why the Basque language survived. Pompelo became an important military garrison south of the Pyrenees. To the west, Roman advances continued with campaigns against the Cantabri during the Cantabrian Wars. Archaeological remains show Roman garrisons along the Ebro River trade routes, as well as a road linking Astorga, with Bertigala, modern Bordeaux. The Basques also appear in Roman military records. A contingent of Varduli soldiers was sent to Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain, where they earned the honorific title Fida, meaning faithful. The Romans often signed alliances, fodera, with local tribes, granting them autonomy in exchange for loyalty. The historian Livy distinguished between the fertile Ager Vasconum, located in the Ebro Basin, and the mountainous Saltus Vasconum to the north. Romanization was deeper in the Ager, while in the Saltus Roman settlements were sparse and small. By the late Roman Empire, groups of rural rebels known as the Bagaudae profoundly affected the region. During the 4th and 5th centuries, the Basque area between the Garonne and the Ebro largely slipped from Roman control amid these uprisings. Several Roman villas, including those at Liadena and Ramalete, were destroyed by fire. The appearance of numerous local coin mints suggests the creation of an internal frontier zone in Vasconia, where money was struck to pay troops. After Rome's collapse, the Basques continued to face conflict, this time with the Visigoths, Rome's allies. Although Christian communities appeared early in some Basque areas, the process of Christianization was very slow. For centuries, the Basques held on to their pagan beliefs, many of which later became part of Basque mythology. Their conversion followed a pattern similar to the Germanic peoples who resisted Christian expansion under the Carolingians in the 8th and 9th centuries, such as the Saxons. The process began in the 4th century and, according to some scholars, lasted into the 12th or even the 15th century. One of the earliest references comes from the poet Prudentius in the early 5th century. Writing in his Peristephanon, he praised the Vasconic town of Calahorra, mentioning its former pagan inhabitants and the martyrs who suffered under Roman persecution around 305. Calahorra became an episcopal seat in the 4th century, with its bishop responsible for territories that included parts of present-day Rioja, Biscay, Alava, Gipuzkoa, and Navarre. By the 5th century, Os Elusa was also an episcopal see in Novem Populania, though the real influence of these centers is unclear. The fall of Roman power marked a turning point. From the late 5th century, the Basques were no longer tied to Roman civilization and its urban culture, and paganism remained strong at least until the late 7th century, when the missionary Saint Amandus attempted, unsuccessfully, to convert them. Even so, Frankish chroniclers describing the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in 778 did not mention Basque paganism, despite its potential propaganda value. At the same time, Odo of Aquitaine, a leader allied with Basques, was recognized by the Pope as a Christian ruler. When Charlemagne sought to expand Frankish power into Aquitaine and Vasconia after their submission in 768 to 769, he relied on the church to reinforce his authority. He reasserted control in the Pyrenees in 778, redistributing land to bishops and abbots while promoting baptism among the Basques in that area. Muslim writers from the period of the Umayyad conquest of Hispania and the early 9th century described the Basques not as Christians but as magi, or pagan sorcerers. A record from 816 even mentions a local leader near Pamplona referred to as a Sultan, likely a corruption of the Basque word Zaldun, meaning knight. Later Muslim historians criticized the Banu Qasi for their alliances with these pagan Basque leaders. Despite this, the Basques were never conquered by the Umayyads. Instead, they preserved their independence and sometimes entered into alliances with Muslim powers such as the Banu Qasi, particularly when resisting Frankish or Cordoban pressure. In 409, the Vandals, Alans, and Suevi crossed the Western Pyrenees into Hispania, followed by the Visigoths in 416 as allies of Rome. The exact impact of these movements on Basque lands is uncertain. In 418, Rome granted the Visigoths control of Aquitania and Tarraconensis as foederae, likely to help defend Novem Populana from raids by the Bagaudae. Although some historians have linked the Basques to these rebels, the chronicler Hydasius distinguished clearly between the Vascons and the Bagaudae. The Visigoths laid claim to Basque territories early on but struggled to control them. Between 435 and 450, rebellions and campaigns took place around Toulouse, Araceli, and Turiasum. In 449 to 451, the Suevi king Rechiar devastated Vascon lands, damaging many settlements. Calahorra and Pamplona survived, but the Roman town of Iruña Valea was abandoned. The Visigoths attempted further invasions after 456, possibly crossing the Pyrenees at Roncesvalles, but the details remain obscure. During this time, Basques increasingly appeared in sources as mountain warriors threatening nearby urban centers. In 507, the Franks defeated the Visigoths at Vuillet and drove them out of Aquitaine, leaving the Basques positioned between two rival powers. Both Franks and Visigoths attempted to subdue Vasconia around 581 but failed. A Frankish defeat in 587 even suggests Basque expansion north of the Pyrenees, though whether the Basques themselves were expansionist remains debated. To contain them, the Franks created the Duchy of Vasconia to the north, while the Visigoths established the Duchy of Cantabria to the south. During the 6th to 8th centuries, the Duchy of Vasconia extended across both sides of the Pyrenees. The regions of Cantabria and Pamplona remained outside Visigothic control, sometimes allying with the Franks instead. Between 660 and 678, Duke Fuc Felix consolidated Vasconia, creating a strong polity that resisted Merovingian authority. This Basque-Aquitanian realm reached its height under Odo the Great. The Umayyad conquest of Hispania in 711 and the rise of the Carolingians soon challenged this independence and contributed to the fragmentation of Vasconia. After Odo's death in 735, Frankish rulers made repeated attempts to subdue Vasconia. His descendants Hunold and Weifer resisted, but by 762, King Pippin had devastated the region, and by about 769, Vascon leaders submitted to him at the Garonne. At this time, Vasconia was described as extending from Cantabria all the way to the Loire, reflecting Basque presence deep into Aquitaine. Tensions with the Franks came to a head during Charlemagne's campaigns. His siege of Zaragoza was disrupted by Basque resistance, and after he destroyed the walls of Pamplona, his rearguard under Roland was ambushed and defeated at the First Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in 778, an action led by Duke Lupus. This event signaled a break in allegiance. After 781, Charlemagne stopped appointing dukes in Vasconia, choosing instead to rule the area directly through the Kingdom of Aquitaine. In the early 9th century, the Basque Muslim principality of the Banu Qasi emerged near Tudela. Acting as a buffer between Basques and Cordoban Umayyads, they also played a role in the creation of the independent Kingdom of Pamplona after the Second Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in 824. In that battle, Pamplonese and Banu Qasi forces defeated a Frankish army led by Counts Eblus and Aznar. At the same time, Alava became a contested zone between Asturian and Cordoban influence. Around 824, Eneco Arista rose to power in Pamplona and established a dynasty that resisted Frankish control south of the Western Pyrenees. His family and the Banu Qasi ruled side by side until the early 10th century. Later, under Sancho I Garces, who reigned from 905, Pamplona aligned itself with other Christian kingdoms and began expanding southward. The Basques also faced Viking incursions during this period. Between 844 and 859, Vikings raided the region, killing Duke Seguin II of Gascony, capturing Bayonne and Pamplona, and even taking King Garcia prisoner. Viking attacks persisted until 982, when Duke William II Sanchez of Gascony secured the territory and promoted monastic growth. By the 10th century, Vasconia had fragmented into smaller feudal regions such as Soule and Labourd. South of the Pyrenees, the Kingdom of Castile, the Kingdom of Pamplona, and Pyrenean counties like Aragon. Under Sancho III the Great, the Kingdom of Pamplona reached its peak. His rule extended over much of the southern Basque country, from Burgos and Santander to northern Aragon. Through marriage, he also controlled Castile and held authority over Gascony and Leon. However, in 1058, the Duchy of Vasconia was transformed into Gascony and merged with Aquitaine, gradually losing its Basque political and ethnic identity. After Sancho III's death, his kingdom was divided among his sons, creating separate realms in Castile and Aragon. In 1076, Pamplona itself was partitioned, which diminished the kingdom's power while Aragon expanded into the Ebro Valley. In these areas, Romance languages such as Navarro-Aragonese replaced Basque in many communities. The Kingdom of Navarre re-emerged in 1157 under Garcia Ramirez, known as the Restorer. His reign was marked by conflict with Castile over territories like La Rioja and Álava. To consolidate their authority, Navarrese monarchs of the mid-12th century began granting charters to towns in contested regions, strengthening their political hold. Meanwhile, Castile worked to secure its own borders with Navarre. The Castilian kings developed new commercial routes and established new towns along these paths, reinforcing their influence in Basque areas. Basques also gained a reputation as skilled seafarers. They were among the earliest pioneers of Atlantic maritime activity. Records mention Basque whale oil as early as 6070, and by 1059 whalers from Lapurdi were presenting whale oil to their viscount. Although Basques did not typically consume whale meat, they traded whale products widely with partners in France, Castile, and Flanders. The coastal towns of Gipuzkoa, Durango, and Alava, taken by Castile between 1199 and 1201, soon thrived on fishing and overseas trade. Basque shipyards expanded rapidly, supported by iron production, and developed longboats known as traineras. Whaling and cod fishing brought them into contact with waters as far as the North Sea and, later, Newfoundland in the early 16th century. Basques played important roles in the great voyages of exploration. Ferdinand Magellan's expedition included at least 35 Basque sailors, and after Magellan's death in the Philippines, the Basque Juan Sebastián Elcano completed the first circumnavigation of the globe. Basques also participated in Columbus expeditions and at one point even mutinied against him. However, their maritime ventures were not without conflict. In 1615, Icelanders massacred 32 Basque whalers in the event known as the Spanverjavigin. This decree of hostility remained on the books in Iceland until 2015, when it was officially revoked as part of a Basque-Icelandic reconciliation. The Basque people entered the modern era with a strong tradition of self-government, upheld through their local laws and institutions known as fueros. These gave them control over taxation, courts, and military obligations, even as they were caught between the growing powers of France and Spain. However, over the 16th and 17th centuries, both kingdoms increasingly eroded Basque autonomy. By the time of the French Revolution, the northern Basques lost their ancient institutions entirely, while in Spain, repeated breaches of fueros caused unrest. The 19th century marked the decisive turning point. The Carlist Wars, fought over monarchy and tradition, drew heavy Basque participation. Many sided with the Carlists to defend fueros, but the wars ended with the abolition of Basque self-government in Spain, 1876. Only Navarre retained limited privileges. Industrialization, especially in Biscay and Gipuzkoa, transformed the region soon after. Iron ore exports, new railways, and steelworks spurred an economic boom, but also drew massive immigration from other parts of Spain. This created social tensions and helped inspire Basque nationalism, crystallized with the founding of the Basque Nationalist Party, PNV, in 1895. In the early 20th century, the Basque country became one of Spain's main industrial centers. Basque steel and armaments boomed during World War I. Politically, Basques sought autonomy, and in 1936, during the Spanish Civil War, they briefly achieved a statute of self-government in Biscay, Alava, and Gipuzkoa. But the war brought disaster. Navarre largely supported Franco's uprising, while Biscay and Gipuzkoa stood with the Republic. The bombing of Guernica in 1937 became a symbol of Basque suffering. Franco abolished autonomy, persecuted Basque culture and language, and branded some provinces traitor. During Franco's dictatorship, 1939 to 1975, repression was coupled with another wave of industrialization and immigration. This provoked cultural resistance and, from the 1960s, the emergence of ETA, a radical nationalist group that turned to armed struggle. Basque nationalism split between the moderate PNV and the more radical Abertzale left around ETA. After Franco's death, Spain's transition to democracy brought change. In 1979, a new statute of autonomy granted broad self-government to Alava, Biscay, and Gipuzkoa, creating the Basque autonomous community with its own parliament, police, taxation system, and schools. Navarre became a separate autonomous region with a special fiscal regime. The French Basque country, long marginalized, finally established a joint municipal authority only in 2017.